All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to another AgroPlus Friday webinar. This week we have Taurus Ag Nutrition and we have Clayton Miller and Mike Dolinsky. Had to check
You
my
bet.
notes for that one.
Huh?
So they're going to be presenting on Taurus products. So just a little bit of housekeeping. Keep yourself muted unless you have a question to ask. And if you do have a question to ask, either feel free to type it in the chat or raise your hand or unmute yourself and ask away. We can turn this into a little bit more of a discussion versus a presentation if we have questions. And at the end, we'll do a draw for a jug of Clayton's product. So with that, Clayton, you can take it away.
All right. Well, good morning, guys. Like Lyle said, my name is Clayton Miller. I actually live down in Milk River, Alberta, and today we have Mike Dolinsky from Taurus helping me out here too. We're both going to be speaking on some different aspects of our business and ways that we can kind of help you as farmers. So a little bit of history about Taurus. We've been around for close to 25 years. I've been with Taurus myself for about 1 year now. It's been a great ride. Taurus does a lot of different things, and I'm lucky enough to be busy from spring right through the winter. So we cover quite a variety of products, and today I kind of am choosing a tailored approach, and we're going to pick a couple that we can fit into you guys and your operations for this year, and some of the products that maybe AgroPlus as a company has kind of focused on. So with that, I guess we'll kind of get started. So the title of my presentation today, we're managing your nutrients for 2025 with superior logistics. So Taurus as a company, we like to focus on kind of four pillars. We have four pillars of our business, and that's focusing on agronomy and soil health, fertility-based products like your granular fertility, foliar fertility, seed fertility, plant enhancement technologies, and then biologicals as well. So talking about efficiency, what does the term efficiencies of fertilization mean to you? Well, in Western Canada and even farming as a whole, nitrogen and phosphate usage over the last 50 years, our consumption of nitrogen has consistently gone up, as you can see in the graph here, following the trend line up right from 1960 to 2010. Same thing with our phosphorus fertilizer consumption, but our cereal production has kind of lagged off. It's trended upwards, but we really haven't matched our nitrogen consumption. As we've been chasing higher yields, lots of guys have just been pouring the nitrogen to it, hoping that it's going to change the output in the end. But maybe in the end, we're not managing our nitrogen properly. I would argue that the reason why our phosphorus numbers aren't paralleling our nitrogen is due to cost, right? That's probably the main reason for it. But today we're going to talk about some ways that maybe we can keep our production up here, but not rely on just giving your crops the groceries and hoping for the best. So we're going to kind of talk a little bit about nitrogen management to begin with here, and ways for you as farmers where we can manage those tons where we're spending big dollars on the most effective way possible. So I'm going to put some different terminology up here, and like Lyle said, I'd kind of like this to be a open discussion kind of presentation here. So can any of you guys on the call right now, can you do you know like maybe 3 or more of these different names on here? Can you guys identify them?
We usually have a pretty quiet bunch, but I think
Recall?
most should be familiar with it.
Right. Okay. So we're going to kind of touch on each of these terms today. You don't need to know them right now. We will do a pretty good job of explaining them and trying to make it simple. That's kind of my job. So we will get into it. So this, if you have our Taurus book handy, this is in our book, and it's our nitrogen stabilizer section. And what this is showing the two different processes of how urea goes through hydrolysis and nitrification. So we have the first cycle we're going to kind of overlay here is hydrolysis. So when you actually are applying urea or UAN to your field, we are showing the two different loss pathways and the conversion from your granular fertility into available form. So if you look on the chart here, the only plant available forms we have is either ammonium or nitrate. So with the little green thing beside them, that means that they are plant available. Now that's, at the end of the day, we are trying to trap our nutrients in our nitrogen as these two forms. So hydrolysis, mostly that is gassing off. It's volatilization, the loss of ammonia gas. Nitrification, on the other hand, the bottom one, the green one, we're more focusing on denitrification and the process of soil nitrates into gaseous nitrogen. So the majority of Western Canada fertilizes with urea or UAN, liquid UAN. So urea at its raw form is not plant available, right? Not everybody thinks that it just breaks down, dissolves, and is plant available. Well, there's a lot more things that go on than that, right? So in order to initiate hydrolysis, which is your urea prills dissolving down and going into plant available form, we need urease enzyme. So urease enzyme, as you can see in that by that first arrow, is the key to starting the first part of the process. So urease enzyme is kind of found in the thatch layer or in that top kind of 6 inches of the soil. That's where the overwhelming majority of this enzyme is found. And since ammonium is stable, that's what we want. But the whole idea behind this is that we're trying to slow the conversion down from urea into ammonia to give it kind of a slow release so you can get it more stably into ammonia. So how do we do this? Now, what we do at Taurus, we deal with quite a few different nitrogen stabilizers and different products, right? So one of the active ingredients that we're targeting for this specific pathway for hydrolysis is called NBPT. That is the one for it. And what it does is it slows down that urease enzyme, it inhibits it. And this process normally takes like 24 to 48 hours. With NBPT, this process can slow it down to about 14 to 21 days. So we're giving that soil a chance to buffer, right? Buffering that nitrogen into plant available form. Now, you can also see that we need hydrogen to make this process work. So we start out as NH3, which is ammonia. We need more hydrogen to get it into stable ammonium form. Now, where do we get that hydrogen? That hydrogen we get from either rain, right, H2O, or we get it from the soil from its pH, right? So a pH of 4, pH is power of hydrogen, or how much free hydrogen you have in the soil. A soil that has a pH of 4 has way more free hydrogen than a pH of 8, right? So in the conversion of your nitrogen into stable form, your pH has way more of an effect than what a lot of people really think about. And the funny thing is that before we started doing one pass fertilization, we're one of the only countries in the world that does everything in one pass, right? When we used to float a lot of stuff, well, guys thought, well, if I'm going to lose, let's just say they think they're going to lose 20%. Well, if I apply 20% more, well, then it just offsets my losses. Well, we're going to talk about that today, and that mindset isn't really right. Your soil has a determined amount of hydrolyzing capability, and it's based on your water and it's based on pH. And just going from whether you're applying 50 pounds, 100 pounds, 1,000 pounds, your soil has a set amount that it's going to be able to, the ability to hydrolyze that urea. So
And
again,
sorry, Clayton, some soil tests will actually give you a good indication of this, but not all will.
that's right. That's right. So again, on this slide, this is just a kind of this is just focusing straight on this. So we're trying to, ammonia needs to find hydrogen. And that hydrogen, again, we're getting it from our soil or our pH. So this outlines how the free hydrogen in the soil will be present in an acidic soil versus a basic soil. More free hydrogen around. Same thing on this chart. I actually reference this chart quite a bit, and guys would be quite surprised to find the difference between 5.5 pH versus a 7.5. So when we talk about volatilization, that's the gassing off if you were just in a shallow band, or if you were soil applying your nitrogen in the broadcast. So this is days applied 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and then a pH of 5.5 to 7.5. So as you can see, in a pH of 7.5, which is very common where I live and probably a lot of your customers, in worst case scenario, you could be losing up to 44% of your nitrogen versus in a pH of 5, because you have more free hydrogen around to act as binding sites, you can actually have quite a bit lower potential for volatilization. So as a farmer, there really isn't a blanket approach to nitrogen and fertility. Every conversation that I have with the farmer is different based on their soil type, their drill type, their how they want to apply things, where they get their fertilizer, whatever, right? So everything that we do is a very tailored approach. You're not going to hear me or Mike or anybody at Taurus come into the farm and come with, oh, this works for everybody in Southern Alberta. No, we work with a very specific tailored approach. So this study was done talking about different applications of urea. So talking about surface applied, 1-inch band, 2-inch deep band, 3-inch deep band. So a lot of people think that because their mid-row banders put their nitrogen down 1 inch in the soil, they think it's good, right? It's covered in dirt. It's not going to gas off. Well, unfortunately, that's not the case, as you can see. So in this chart here, each of these different gray bars indicate, I believe it's 2/10 of an inch. Yeah, 1/5 of an inch. So 2/10 of an inch for wetting. So there's 3 different applications here. Typically, we say that you'd want about 20 mils of rain on an acre to start hydrolysis and complete it, right? Like the worst case scenario for you as a grower, if you were surface applying or shallow banding your urea, is to go put a bunch of urea on and then say, well, I think it's going to rain a little bit tomorrow, so let's go do it. Well, if you don't get that enough rain to finish the hydrolysis portion of your urea, our gassing off potential is far more than if it was just sitting there dry, right? So the worst case scenario would be like a 5 to 10 mil rain after an application, starts that process, gets it converting over to ammonia, and then it doesn't have enough to finish the process, right? So that's what we're really trying to slow down with a nitrogen stabilizer, is to slow down that rapid conversion from urea into unstable ammonia. So in this chart here, a 1-inch band, if you have your mid-row banders on your Borgo set to 1 inch because you want it to pull easier or whatever, a lot of guys aren't putting it down to 3 inches. That's not very common, right? 1.5 inches is kind of where most guys have it, just if right where their fertilizer level is, maybe a little bit deeper. 2 inches would be a good starting point. As you can see, once you get it down a little bit further to where it's not drying out in that top layer, then it becomes quite a bit more stable.
Yeah, that's a significant difference between the 1 and the 2 inch on that chart.
Huge difference. Yeah, huge difference. And the funny thing is, like I see in northern Montana, they outfit a lot of Borgos with broadcast kits. So rather than having mid-row banders with discs that go in between the rows, they had broadcast rigs rigged up on them. So they're just spraying on the ground and hoping for a little bit of incorporation. And I just laugh when I see it, right? It's not really the best way to be managing your nitrogen. And I think there's just a better way to approach this. So NBPT or urease inhibitors, that's what we're doing to combat that volatilization in that first part of this process, right? The hydrolysis process. So the urease enzyme is naturally occurring, but the vast majority, again, is in that top layer of trash and thatch. And with a zero-till operation, like 80% of the people that we're dealing with are in, we're accumulating a big layer of that thatch and trash in the top part of the soil. So we are getting more urease enzyme in our soil than what we had 20 years ago, right? When guys were tilling and turning the fields over, our concentration of that enzyme in the top layer of the soil has gotten quite a bit higher. So it's funny, we think that we're actually helping our soil, but I'm not saying that zero till is bad, but nowadays, because we have this big thatch layer, the worst case scenario would be as if you had lots of trash and thatch and let's just say a stripper stubble operation, right? If you went and floated on a bunch of urea on stripper stubble, there would be so much more of a concentration of urease enzyme than that of bare soil, where if you broadcast it on bare soil compared to that stripper stubble, you would actually have more losses on the stripper. So as we've seen, under bad conditions, which would be like 7.5 pH, low moisture, you can lose almost up to 50% of your N if you're putting it in that shallow band or broadcasting it. And logistically, lots of guys are kind of going back to the broadcasting, right? When you go into Saskatchewan, kind of that, well, Rosetown, Kyle area south, there's lots of guys that have a floater and they're large farms. They try and cut down a drill and they float on 80% of their nitrogen in the fall. Well, if you do it in the fall, the idea is, on the next slide here, we'll talk a little bit about how moisture and temperature can actually affect that. So the urease conversion, or that, not conversion, but the urease enzyme, it actually kind of, it doesn't stop, but it slows down in the winter, right? So when that soil temperature gets down to about minus 20 degrees, that's when that urease enzyme has finally really slowed down, right? So that's when that rapid conversion in the winter months isn't happening as much. But unfortunately, like we were talking this morning, it's 8 degrees and sunny outside right now. So our soil, I would be very surprised if it's minus 20 degrees right now. That urease enzyme keeps working throughout the winter in a year like this. So the next portion of the nitrogen process is the nitrification process. So we get our urea into stable ammonium, right? So say we just used an NBPT stabilizer. We did a great job, we put it on, we got our urea slowly turning into stable ammonium. Well, now it's safe, right? Well, unfortunately, that's not the case. So once your urea has gone into ammonium, there's actually two other ways that we're able to lose our nitrogen. We're able to lose it in the form of nitrite, which can gas off, and we're able to lose it as nitrate, which can leach as well. So we're not safe yet. So you just can't win. I know it sucks, but we're going to talk about how we can kind of fix that. So the whole process kind of begins with nitrosomonas bacteria. And what they do is they convert ammonium into nitrate, which is the gaseous nitrogen that has our friends in Ottawa all stirred up, right? So Trudeau and the desk jockeys in Ottawa that are concerned about nitrous oxide emissions. And this is where it's coming from, right? So these nitrosomonas bacteria are what converts our ammonium into nitrite. So I'm sure you've heard of the Canadian Nitrogen Emission Reduction Plan, but after today, I'm sure you guys will know more than those guys in Ottawa, right? So it's hard to come out with a plan that they can effectively blanket across the country, right? I just sat here and told you that I can't create a plan that is a broadcast for all of Southern Alberta, and they want to do it for all of Canada, right? It's not, it doesn't make sense, but it's what we're stuck with, and that's what we have to deal with, right? So if your soil, the nice thing though, if your soil is colder than about 4 degrees Celsius, these little bacteria aren't working in the winter, right? So the nitrosomonas bacteria and those nitrobacter, once the soil gets colder, unlike the urease enzyme, that process actually kind of slows down. So this is the whole process the government's concerned about, and that's what they want us to fix. And first, I want to say that nitrate isn't a bad thing. Nitrate is plant available, right? It's not bad. It's like ammonium, but it's not as stable. So nitrate can denitrify, which is the process on the previous slide, but denitrification is most prone under those waterlogged conditions. And it's mostly the areas kind of around a slough, right? So picture a slough, you seeded your nice, beautiful field, you get a big 1-inch dump, and you have an accumulation of a bunch of water. Now, that area around where the water is, where it's saturated, that is where the overwhelming majority of those losses are going to happen from. And denitrification happens under those waterlogged conditions because the bacteria strip oxygen off the nitrate and turn it back into nitrite, which is able to gas off. And that happens under anaerobic, which means no air, and that's when it can gas off as NO2. So the truth is, under most of our soil in this area, we don't have the heavy clay soils like in Manitoba. That's where these guys are worried about this, right? We have predominantly fairly sandy clay loam soils, right? So this is side of the story now. We're going to talk a little bit about CEC, or cation exchange capacity. And that's kind of an indicator of your soil type or soil texture, right? Higher CEC, more clay. Lower CEC, less clay. So when you have those high CECs of like, let's just say like a 20 plus, when you get into those 20 plus or even into your 40s, you have a fairly heavy clay soil, right? That's when your denitrification potential can be quite a bit higher. So we can actually indicate these things, like Lyle said, on a soil test. And it's an indicator of this, your pH, and a couple different things, right? But the other problem is on sandy soil, like where we live, we might not be chasing the losses so much from maybe a denitrification or nitrite way. We're actually concerned about leaching our nitrates, right? So sandy soil on irrigation or dry land, big rains last year, like in that beginning of June. I don't know if you guys remember, but we got that big, huge shot of rain, and the hilltops, well, they all turned lime green. We couldn't figure it out what the hell it was, and we just haven't seen it in so long. And what it was is we're leaching our nitrates, right? So putting down a shallow band of urea with our banders or with our side band, whatever it was, we had that big shot of rain after we had good spring moisture, and we leached our nitrates away. So how do we fix that? Now we're going to use a nitrification inhibitor, or there's several different ones in the marketplace. There's nitropyrin, DCD, DMPP. There's lots of different ways you can do it. our products and our active ingredients we use is DMPP. So this inhibits or slows down the function of nitrosomonas bacteria and the conversion from ammonium to nitrite. So by slowing the formation of nitrite, we lessen the losses in the form of nitrite gassing off, but it also slows down the rate of conversion from ammonium to nitrate, or from nitrite to nitrate, so we can have less leaching as well. So there's also a way that some other people think that if we just go based on our CEC, our soil moisture, and the soil temperature, we don't need one of these, right? I'm sitting here today and saying that our soil temperature, Lyle said that he was frozen up when you went and dug that big chunk of soil out for your test the other day. Well, there's a lot of soil that's been sitting under a big blanket of snow, and it hasn't froze real hard. We had 1 week of cold weather, and those denitrification processes can happen. Look at this now where I live, the water's all running and we have big slough areas and stuff like that. If you were broadcasting stuff in the fall, we're still going to get that same thing. And on our pivots on irrigation, we're still going to get the same thing in that sandy soil.
Yeah, right up until about 3 weeks ago, really, we had very little frost in the ground right until early February.
That's right. And I mean, we don't think about it too, but organic matter has a lot to do with it, right? Like low organic matter doesn't have as much urease enzyme. And quite frankly, we live on dry land. We're operating on a 2 to 3% organic matter usually, right? There might be some guys with even less than that. And it's just, it doesn't help because we don't have as much urease enzyme in the soil. And it's tough where we live, and we just have to really tailor our operations to it. So the best case scenario for me would be is if we could float our nitrogen late in the fall, if you're going to float when that soil is cooler than 4 degrees Celsius. If you're doing that, I'm not going to sit here and say you need a DMPP product, but I will say that it's a good idea if you do have that sandy soil or a clay soil. But it's kind of a risky thing because if you look like Lyle said, we haven't had that freeze up this year. So from my point of view, I would just do it with a dual stabilizer and not have to worry about it. Now, if you're floating in the spring or in the summer, I would definitely use a dual stabilizer. But if you're using a pivot or something like that and you can put some rain on it right away, then maybe you don't need an NBPT where it's gassing off, right? So you can kind of figure out how to tailor your stabilizers or your approach to your operation. So there's lots of different ones in the marketplace. Like some ones that you're probably familiar with is Agritane. That was kind of the first one that really came out. It was an MBPT product. There's other ones out there from like Neon Surface, Neon Air. They have a whole stable of different things. Super U, which is pre-treated urea, which is made in Brandon by Coke. It's NBPT and DCD, which is, so NBPT is your volatilization, and then DCD is your denitrification product. If you think about like ESN, they're not stabilizing your nitrogens. All they are is a polymer coating. It delays the release of nitrogen. And at the beginning of its life, it was more directed towards like seed safety and stuff like that, right? But it does help with slowing that conversion because it just delays its release, right? But lots of guys have had issues in the last couple of years. There's been ESN prills breaking in the drills or in the bin, and then it kind of renders that whole philosophy null, right? So there's various different ways we can do this, and I'll kind of highlight some of the ways that we do it. So we have 3 kind of lineups. We have an RMU 18%, which is a straight volatilization product. And that would be great for those guys that are spreading late into the fall, right? That would be a great one for them. It applies very good, but it's cheaper, has great performance, but the only thing is it doesn't have a DMPP denitrification product in there, right? So we have RMU Advanced, which I would call kind of our Cadillac, or probably the top tier of protection in our stable. It's a 30% MBPT, 15% DMPP. Very good product. Comes in 2 separate jugs. So you're not if you bought a tote or something like that, you'd have to meter on 2 separate things. So then the easiest way to do it, and my personal favorite one, is Active Stabilizer Plus. So all our products are made in Saskatoon by Active Agriscience. We really focus on creating good formulations for our customers to allow them to do it easy, because we know a lot of customers, they try treating urea once, they have a big mess, they get a headache, and then they never do it again, right? So we want to make it as easy and as effective as possible. So my recommendation to you, if you're somebody who just wants to try some stabilizers or to kind of dip their toes into that market, I would really recommend Active Stabilizer Plus. It's our most economical product we offer, but the performance we get is quite amazing. So this product is safe to say that you will stabilize about 75% of your nitrogen, where something like RMU Advanced, which is maybe the top tier of nitrogen stabilizing, it might get 90%, but that comes at a premium, right? So I really believe the bang for your buck with this Stabilizer Plus is a great way to do it. And you can put on like 1.2 liters per metric ton all the way up to 2.4. I kind of like the sweet spot area of like that 1.6, 1.8. That gives pretty good protection for the money, and it sets up very nice. And if you're just kind of dipping your toes into it, it's a safe way to get into nitrogen stabilizers without sacrificing any kind of, let's say, logistical headaches, right? Now, there's lots of different ways you can do it. You can do it on your farm yourself, and I'm happy to discuss with you how to do that. But Chinook treaters, actually, they treat nitrogen now for people. And I've done it with a couple different customers. And same as their treaters for seed, they can come out and do that for people now too, right? So they could treat right from your bin back into your truck, and then it would be good for seeding. Or you could treat right out of the bin back into the truck and put it straight back into the bin again, right? And be good for the winter. Do this in the fall and not worry about it. I don't recommend doing it in the cold of winter like last week, because when it's real cold like that, your urea can't absorb a lot of those chemicals. No different than if Lyle and the guys come out and seed treat your lentils or your wheat or whatever. If it's super cold, seed treat doesn't flow well, it doesn't absorb into the seeds well. I would just recommend doing it when it's maybe a little bit warmer, right? So
yeah, you want the product to dry and not freeze.
Yeah, that's right. So we actually have a brand new product called TSN. And so I love nitrogen stabilizers, and I really believe a lot of people should be using them. There's a lot of people in, like even in Brazil, almost all of their nitrogen that they import is stabilized, and they have it mandated. We're one of the only countries in the world that doesn't have these mandates yet. I don't know if it's going to come to that point, but I think from a farmer perspective, though, to protect our investment and the return on investment that we get by using a stabilizer like this can come 10, 20-fold, right? We talked about how you can lose up to 40% of your nitrogen in a shallow band like that. If that happens, that's big money, right? So I really believe that they are what's going to separate you from being that next level of production, right? So, but we have that product called TSN now, which takes all the headache out of having to treat your nitrogen, you guys can actually buy from AgroPlus now pre-treated urea that comes in rail cars. So 90 metric tons at a time, pre-treated urea with top level logistics, economics, and agronomics, right? So I added them into my slides last night, but for some reason they might not be showing up. But TSN is going to be our new product, and Super U in the marketplace has typically run at about a $200 metric ton premium, right? So if urea is $600 a ton, Super U is $800 a ton. We are trying to be in that like less than half, or not less than half, but about half of that premium, right? So we're trying to be like a $75 to $100 a ton premium over regular urea. So, and come into the marketplace at a good point, right? So Super U also is FOB Brandon, and to get it to Southern Alberta, we're quite a bit higher. So we're able to rail this stuff into Can-Do terminal now at Wilson Siding with AgroPlus here, and you guys are going to have access to the top level of nitrogen efficiency, but none of the headache, right? So that's going to be the cool part of next year. So kind of gearing off and separating away from nitrogen, we're going to talk a little bit about TAP 3 and kind of some of our phosphate products. And I'm going to talk a little bit about efficiency at the beginning and maybe what does it mean to a grower in 2025.
Hey,
Now,
just a second here before we switch topics. There was a question from Gary. So we have growers putting down 2800 in the fall, just spraying it on before freeze up. What loss could we expect with that? I would think it would be fairly minimal if you're putting it on right before freeze up.
Yeah, so if it was right before freeze up, from a denitrification standpoint, it would be very low, right? But from a nitrification standpoint, if it still has to do with more of the what's going on in the soil rather than the actual ambient air temperature, right? So I would say that unless your soil has gotten down to that -20 or so, that urease enzyme is still working. So unless you have the moisture and super, super cold soil, you can still volatilize, right? And the unfortunate thing is that for volatilization to happen, we need, but wind can really make it worse too, right? So where we live in Southern Alberta, it's always windy, right? And when you stir up that gaseous layer kind of on the soil there, it will actually make things even worse. So from a volatilization standpoint, if it's just before freeze up like that, you can still lose quite a bit on the soil, right? If you're streaming it on. Oh, George, got a question?
Yes. Can you hear me?
You bet.
Can you hear me, Lyle?
Yep.
Yeah,
I can hear you.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, what product would you use, let's say, on nitrogen? Let's say the same product for sandy soil and irrigation.
Like for an easy go-to for me is Active Stabilizer Plus. It would be your dual mode, right? So you get the protection for your volatilization as well as your leaching and denitrifying, right? So I would look at Active Stabilizer Plus. That's what I would look at.
Okay. Another question, you mentioned something about losing your nitrogen at with low pH soils.
Yep.
So I have a field here that is a pH of 5.
So actually, with a pH of 5, you'd have, maybe I said it wrong, but you'd actually have more free hydrogen in a low pH soil. So your losses would likely be less in something where it's a pH of 5. When you get up into a 7, it's opposite of what you think. The higher the number, the less hydrogen you have, right? So your pH of 7.5 would have less free hydrogen to get that urea to bind into stable form. So your your pH of 5 would have less risk than your stuff of 7.5.
Yeah, or some of the guys that are at 8 or 8.5 would have a little bit more problems with it than you would.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, can I make a comment, Clayton? Now that Taurus brought trace genomics to Canada, you can actually, from your soil sample, determine or get a handle on your risk of loss, because the test actually gives you a risk of urease, the microbes that are involved in the breakdown of urea, and also nitrification, so you can get a little bit of a feel for what your real risk is with a soil test nowadays. Yeah, we couldn't a year ago, but we can today. So that may be something for you guys in the south. If you got 2 or 3 of the farmers that are on this, take some soil samples, similar kinds of soil conditions, you might get a feel for the area in terms of what the risk is, or at least give you some idea of what's going on.
Yep, and AgroPlus is doing set up to do trace complete samples now. And if any of you guys come to Ag Expo next week, we'll have I'll have my laptop there, and any of the guys, we can come over and show you kind of how that works, and we're able to see it across your whole farm, right? So you could see what your level of risk is, and if you should be using a stabilizer. You can see, well, 3/4 of my field, the risk is way up here, and the other quarter is down here. So I should probably use one across the whole farm, right? So Lyle and the guys are set up to do that kind of stuff now, and there's way more that they show than just your nitrogen. But like Mike said, it's a great way to get a handle on if you should be using one.
Oh, perfect.
So Clayton, one more thing on page 7 on your in your book.
Just a second.
It says pH.
Yeah, I'm back. Page 7.
Okay, page 7 on your book. It says pH effect on nutrient availability, and it kind of tapers off, like the nitrogen tapers off if you on the lower pH, or maybe I'm not reading that chart right.
Yeah, so you're looking at this. Can you does it show? No.
Yes, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that one. Okay. Yeah, like, so that one has more to do with, it's not really talking about your losses and the availability of it for that one. That one more has to do with different things that are in the ground that could be affecting it, rather than just talking about the conversion of your nitrogen into stable form. I don't think that one is what we're really going to be focusing on. So I wouldn't focus on that one so much for nitrogen. Can you comment on that anymore, Mike? I don't really know what that one is pertaining to as much. It's not really pertaining to stabilizers, right? So that I wouldn't focus so much on that. Mike, do you have your book handy with you? If you actually go into our book at the nitrogen management side, so on the first page, it looks like this. And that's where that same chart that I showed you on the percent volatilization based on soil pH, that's kind of the more what I'm speaking to when we're talking about how the free hydrogen in your soil aids in making it into stable ammonium, right? So that's more what you should be looking at rather than that first page.
Yeah, that chart just shows you the impact of soil pH in terms of the plant's ability to uptake the nutrients from the soil, rather than to do with volatilization or the effect on urea.
Mm-hmm.
But you can see that as the pH goes up for you guys that are in high pHs in the 8, some of the nutrients, like the micronutrients, become less and less available the higher the pH goes, except for molybdenum. But at lower pHs, most of the micronutrients are fairly readily available down to about a pH of 5. And then it gets to be a problem. And you can see with the macronutrients, the same thing that, people with a pH of somewhere between 6 and 7.3 actually have a real advantage over most other farmers in the area, because the pH allows for darn near optimal uptake of nutrients. When you get beyond that, either higher or lower, you have some different issues that occur. But pH is really important if you're buying new land, by the way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like we'll get into further on, like the pH doesn't have just an effect on your nitrogen efficiency. It's going to have a big play on your phosphorus and a lot of different things, right? So it I know a lot of you probably know the pH of your soil, but it's just amazing to see how much of an impact it has on more than just this one thing we're talking about right now. So with that, I guess we'll kind of finish off. I got a couple more slides here. We are launching a new product this year with AgroPlus, which would be kind of a direct-to-farm option for you guys. And we're focusing again on the whole mantra this year is kind of on efficiency, ease of logistics, and just making things easy for you guys as growers. And I mean, looking at the new crop prices this year, I mean, there was some $9 durum that came out last week. There was some $15 canola for new crop that came out, but we're not sitting at the high COVID prices anymore, right? Our input prices are up, machinery prices are up. We got looming tariffs coming on where we don't know what's going to happen to our machinery costs, different things like that. So I think growers in 2025 are going to be on a pretty, let's call it defensive strategy, right? Like defend the castle kind of thing, and just keep it simple, stupid, right? So I kind of think that guys are going to be maybe more on a commodity kind of basis this year. Maybe we're not growing that crop that has to sit in the bin for 2 years before we can sell it. We're going to want something we can trade for cash right away. And also just, we're going to be looking for products that make our lives easier. And honestly, farmers pay for logistics, right? Whether you guys think about it or not, when you move from 4 combines to 2 combines, because you can do 30 acres an hour versus 20 acres an hour, you're paying for logistics and efficiency, right? So I think guys are maybe going to stick to the basics, like I said, kind of that defend the castle program. But a big part of this year, and what we talked about before, is understanding your soil, knowing what you have to work with at the beginning of the year is the best way to set yourself up for success this year. And I would imagine you guys that are on this call, if you're willing to learn here and willing to try new things, you're probably in that top 20% of farmers that want to try new things, innovate, and be good stewards of the land, right? So I think that with soil testing, that is the best way to set yourself up for 2025. Lyle and Dave and all the guys now are doing soil sampling, and I would strongly encourage you to talk to either your agronomist who you're already working with or the guys at AgroPlus to get a handle on what you got going on. So I've done this presentation a couple different times with AgroPlus, and it seems to resonate well. And we're going to just be talking a little bit about phosphorus at the beginning. And I'm going to kind of challenge the way maybe you think about phosphorus and putting a value on it. So I'm going to put some numbers up. These are in dollars per pound of P into the plant. So 332, 256, 254, 306. So you think, well, there's some in there that are pretty expensive. And you're right, there are, right? But we have to factor in efficiency, no different than that combine that can do 30 acres an hour with a bigger header and cut out a couple combines. We are able to access different kinds of fertilizer that has maybe 80% for, efficiency into a plant, or 65 or 50. Well, I'm sure you'd be wanting to learn about that, right? So you'd be surprised to know that MAP is only 25% efficient at getting phosphorus into the plant on year of application. Now, this number, it can vary a lot. I work with some guys that think it's quite a bit less than that. When I talked about pH before and its effect on your phosphorus, when you have a very low pH, as we'll get into later, that can affect your phosphorus, and it can tie up to aluminum or iron. But on the inverse, where I live, and majority of you guys do, we have a pH of 7.5 or higher, and then your calcium inhibits it. So that 25% can actually be quite a bit lower than that. Some other products out there, like these are the ones that we deal with: Crystal Green, Synchro 50 Max, Tap 3S, 80% efficient, 65% efficient, and 50% efficient. Well, now that's catching your eye, right? You probably want to learn about that. And the funny thing is, though, that when you go in and talk to your fertilizer retail, the first thing you ask them is price per ton. And price per ton isn't always the best way to get a good handle on what you're paying for nutrients. It's funny, and I'm guilty of it too. In southern Alberta, it's kind of bragging rights. Who buys their phos or their urea the cheapest in the summer, right? So July comes up, infill season comes around. What'd you get your urea for? Oh, I got it for $6.60. Oh crap, I paid $6.65. And we complain, or we try and buy the cheapest tons possible. Well, it's interesting to realize that even though these tons here for Crystal Green, Synchro 50 Max, Tap 3, if all you ever look at is price per ton, you're never going to buy these products, right? It'd be very hard to convince somebody to buy a $1,700 or $1,600 a ton product if they don't understand how they work, right? So if you want to get through 2025 and do it in the most efficient and the most economical way, you should really have a hard look at Tap 3S, Crystal Green, or Synchro 50 Max. Now, the interesting thing about Tap 3, and this is what we're going to be talking about today, is it's not just a phosphorus product. You're getting 5 of the 6 macronutrients, and I'm not even putting a value on all the other nutrients you're getting included in that. So now, what the heck is Tap? Taurus came out with Taurus Ag Polyphosphate. What it is we're combining our already proven polysulfate prill and coating it with 3 different forms of phosphate. So what we do is we coat it with triple superphos, single superphos, and phos acid. So we get a very acidic form of phosphorus that has no nitrogen in it, where we don't get that root pairing off at the beginning of the year, where MAP has that big boom all at once. You can get your roots to have either root toxicity or just pairing off from the ammonia. And until that ammonia or ammonium has dissipated, we actually won't see good uptake of phosphorus. Now, these are the different nutrients that are going to be in our polysulfate and our Tap 3 product. Now, do any of you guys know which ones of these nutrients are immobile in the soil? Okay, I'll give it to you. It's phosphorus and potassium. So phosphorus and potassium are not mobile within the soil. They don't move much, right? So when we think of potassium, a lot of that top 6-inch layer of our soil, we can stratify those nutrients because they don't move much. Same as phosphorus. Phosphorus doesn't move within the soil, and your plants can only uptake about, I have a chart that shows it, but it's only about 5 mils away from the root. So that's hardly anything, right? The ability for your plants to get in phosphorus, unless they're right there where it is, they're unable to access it. So with a product like TAP, because it's a very seed safe alternative, we're able to put it right with the seed and know that we're able to have that steady stream of phosphorus into the plant the whole year. Now, what does phosphorus do? Well, what it is, it's the main component for ATP and DNA. So its main function is it plays a role in photosynthesis and stimulates root development. Everyone kind of knows that phosphorus is the main root driver one, right? Well, at the end of the day, its biggest role is actually ATP, so energy for the plant, and DNA synthesis. Well, potassium is kind of known as the quality nutrient. And a lot of us in our area, we have high potassium levels. So on a soil test, it'd be very common to see like 1,500 parts per million on your soil test. But the funny thing is, though, only about less than 5% of that in the soil actually releases in the year in your farm year. So you actually don't get that much into your plant. Magnesium, nobody talks about it, but it's actually very important. Don't get Mike started on it. He'll talk for days, but magnesium is the central component for chlorophyll. It's the central molecule that is involved in like enzyme activation, and it's central to that whole chlorophyll molecule. Calcium, other big one. We talked about how it can inhibit your phosphorus in high pH soils like what you and I deal with, but your plant needs calcium, right? And if one of you guys mentioned you had the book with us, if you look in our uptake and removal chart at the beginning of our book on page 9, calcium is a macronutrient. Your plant will actually use, if you had a 40 bushel canola crop, let's say, you will use twice as much calcium in a year as you will sulfur, but nobody talks about calcium. The nice thing about this product is it's calcium sulfate. So you're not getting, it's available calcium rather than the kind that's in our soil, which is calcium carbonate, and just ties up our phosphorus and makes a headache for you. Now sulfur, that's the big one that has gotten a lot of attention in the last 10 years. Common blend, I used to work retail, used to be a 50-20 blend. Well then guys, they got it drilled into their head, they need sulfur, so they add a 50-20-10 blend, let's say, right? Well, that helps, right? But at the end of the day, at Taurus, we have a mantra of fertility rather than fertilizer. So we're trying to focus on giving those plants a steady stream of nutrients rather than a big boom all at once. So ammonium phosphate can have that, or ammonium sulfate can have a big release of sulfur all at once, and it can dissipate. It's very mobile within the soil. Sulfur is mobile in the soil, and but immobile within the plant, your sulfur is, though, right? Your sulfur and your calcium, they cannot be mobilized up the plant throughout its life. So if it doesn't have it, it will actually show deficiencies throughout the year. So a little bit about the base for this pearl. I mentioned that it was polysulfate's the base for it. Now, where does it come from? This factory that you see here, that's off the coast of the UK, and that's the ocean behind it. And what they do is they go a mile under the ground, and then they go 4 miles under the ocean. So it kind of resembles those potash mines that would be around Saskatoon and stuff like that. And we're mining a rich calcium, sulfur, potassium, magnesium layer, and it's a halite formation. So what that means is under this, the North Sea over there off the UK coast, there's a whole ocean sitting on top of this nutrient-rich layer, and we mine that out of the ground. So we actually take that out of the ground, we run it through this factory, and then we granulate it, and then we coat it with our phosphorus. So the nice thing about this, we talked a little bit about, about ammonium sulfate and its effect, about how it releases very fast. The other thing about using potash, when a lot of guys would love to use it, it's very salty. The chloride inhibits it a little bit, and it's not as uptakeable maybe as using something like polysulfate, where it's very safe to the plant and it can get it into the plant easier. So because we have 5 of the 6 macronutrients in this prill, we actually give a very balanced delivery for optimum plant growth. And this chart they use in university, I must have seen this 100 different times. I actually kind of hate using it now because it was overused, I kind of think, but there is some truth to it. And it's called Lieborg's Law of the Minimum. All we're illustrating here is that your fields will be limited by your most limited nutrient, right? So by giving you a very balanced and maybe broad spectrum of nutrients, we're trying to bring that bottom rung on the barrel up so we can have your top end of production raise. Now, no different than what I said before with the ammonium sulfate. Ammonium sulfate can give you a big boom all at once, and as you see in the red here, that is its days of availability, and it's a big boom all at once, and then 5 to 10 days later, after you get some moisture, it can actually leach out of the rooting zone. Now, if we use something like polysulfate, it is that yellow line that you see on your screen. It gives you 50 to 60 days of availability of all the nutrients that are within the prill. So you get a steady stream of nutrients into your plant when they need it. And I often reference at the beginning of the book, we have a chart that displays, I believe it's on page 15, the nutrient demand by different crops throughout its year. So there's one that shows nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur, and potassium. And your crops don't need all those nutrients right at the beginning of the season. That would be the difference between fertility and fertilizer. Fertilizer is making yourself feel good, applying the nutrients at the beginning of the season, but maybe you don't have them towards the end. With something like polysulfate, we give you that extended availability where you know your plants will have a steady stream of nutrients the whole year. We have some, I don't know if, Mike, did you do these slides with the different checks and the seed safety? Mike might have done these, but this first slide here is a check. So there's no fertilizer added. I believe we have a cereal crop, we have canola, and then we have peas here. So we're simulating seed stress, and Lyle's doing some of this different stuff too for Ag Expo, and he's kind of highlighting seed safety. Now the check will always look the best because it has no fertilizer with it, so keep that in mind. This is premium poly. This is premium poly after 10 days with 100 pounds an acre of application. Looks pretty good on your cereal crop, your canola, very minimal mortality, your pea crop, looking good. Oh, Mike, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, those are mine. And they just I do this testing to just see if there's any toxic effect on the roots and germination.
Yeah.
And one of the things about premium poly and crystal green is you basically don't have toxicity. Same with Sulfur Plus at all compared to sort of other products in the market. And it's all about where it lands and how the seed germinates.
You bet. So next up, ammonium sulfate. Now on your cereals, you can see you get a little bit of toxicity here at germination, but also your canola. Those smaller seeds, they're quite a bit more susceptible to salt interference and toxicity for the roots. Your canola here, this is 50 pounds of AMS 10 days after application, and it's not having a good time right now. It doesn't look healthy. And believe it or not, look at these peas. Those peas are not having a good time right now either.
Peas are really susceptible. Of all the crops we grow, wheat is the most tolerant of toxicity from fertilizer, just the way it is. The peas, because they have to absorb so much water before they even germinate, because of the size of the seed, you get about 40% more weight than seed. They absorb a lot of that nutrient up front, and I think that's why peas and canola, because it's a small seed, are really sensitive. And the smaller the seed, the more risk you have from fertilizer in the seed row.
So yeah, like Mike said, for your seed to germinate, it needs to absorb moisture to start that whole process. And like you said, it'll absorb about 40% of its weight by moisture to start it. And these larger ones like peas can see that salt effect quite a bit more. But on the inverse, the canola, they seem to be. Would you not say the canola is more susceptible too sometimes, Mike?
Yeah, canola is susceptible, and I think that's why over the years, as we've moved away from putting fertilizers in the seed row, we've been able to reduce our seeding rates in canola quite a bit and not have that toxic effect, as long as you don't have flea beetles and other kinds of disease issues that are a problem. You know,
That's
where a canola seed is, and it's well known, historically, that small seeds are more susceptible. And then the other factor that's really important in terms of that is moisture in the soil. The more moisture you have that dilutes out that toxicity, the less risk you have.
So the next one, KCl or potash, right? So we have a lot of guys would love to put down potash in their blends. Maybe it's 5, 10 pounds, whatever. But because it's an immobile nutrient, it doesn't move in the soil. Most people would like to put it with the seed. Well, this is what it does when you put it with the seed. Potash can be very hard. Even look at the cereals here. They're some of the hardiest, toughest plants we have, and it's just torching these plants. Same thing as the canola, and like Mike said, the peas are very sensitive to this.
Yeah. Potassium chloride, muriated potash, is the most salty product that we have in the marketplace.
Yeah,
So,
it's
so
like
the
what?
salt effect there is really significant.
Yeah, it's what 120 or something on the
Yeah,
salt index.
124, 25. It's all fertilizers are basically a salt. And the thing about a salt is it absorbs water very quickly. It's hydroscopic. It absorbs water. Like you take a urea granule or a KCl granule, and you just put it on the soil surface, and it'll disappear within a day. Urea within hours, it'll be gone. So you get a sudden surge, and in this one you get a lot of chloride with it as well, which a lot of guys get a chloride response in cereals in dryland, but the KCl itself, the saltiness, is a bit of a problem for sure.
Yeah.
And that's why any for guys that are using side banding or mid-row banding, any distance you can put between the seed and a fertilizer that has a high salt index, the better. That is one buffer. If it can put half an inch of soil in between, it's a big factor until the root actually drives and hits the actual granule. You got to get that diluted out in the soil profile a little bit.
You bet. So now I'll finally give you the analysis and what we're talking about here. This is TAP 3. So AgroPlus has access to this product and its other variation called 3S. What we're doing is we're combining, again, polysulfate plus 3 sources of phosphorus coated on the prill. So we get a very available form of phosphorus along with the controlled release of everything else within that prill. So we're getting 25% phosphorus, 8% potassium, 7.5 sulfur, 14.9, 15 calcium, and 1.6 mag. Now, nobody really talks about it, but the density of this product is 75 pounds per cubic foot. Regular phosphorus is about 60 pounds per cubic foot. urea is less. I think it's about 45 or 46 pounds per cubic foot. We're able to store more nutrients in one place, so more bulk tons in one place, making your bins hold more, making your tanks go longer. If you do a tank optimizer in your drill, you always have to type in that density factor, and you have to call your retail rep up and say, what the hell is the density of my S15 or my phos or my urea, whatever. That factor goes into how long your tanks will last, right? So with this product, we're satisfying not only the economics, as we talked about at the beginning of the presentation, talking about pounds of phosphorus into the plant on year of application. We are getting we're getting double of what MAP would be, but we're also getting all these other nutrients. We're storing more in one place, so we're satisfying the economics, the logistics, and then all the agronomic things we talked about, from seed safety to delivering that balanced nutrient load with a delayed release across the season. So I'm very excited about this product. We have it out in a few guys' hands this year. It's quickly becoming one of our most popular products. Its variation is TAP 3S, and that is what we have sold some through AgroPlus this year. It just has a little bit more sulfur. So farmers are never happy, and they said that we want a little bit more sulfur. So we cranked it up a bit, and we took it up from 7.5 to 10. I believe we get a little bit less potassium in there, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter which one you go with. I think that you'd be very happy. So
Yeah, maybe the 3S would be a little bit better on canola, right?
yeah, that's kind of where it was geared to. It doesn't really matter to me which one you go with. I think that the TAP 3S or 3, both you'd be very happy with. Again, we're just we're focusing on the whole mantra of fertility rather than fertilizer, getting nutrients safely into your plant. You can put it right with the seed. This stuff, we've done different tests with it, and up to about 200 pounds an acre, we're safe in row. So that would be product, pounds of product, 200 pounds an acre. There's a question here. What's the salt index of TAP? So TAP 3S and 3, their salt index are 17. So because they're a delayed release like that, I would argue that it act like even less than that. So like when we talk about MAP, I believe MAP is like a 20, MAP is 27. So MAP, you can get up to, once you get up to, well, it depends on your seedbed utilization. But with MAP, you're not going to be able to push it like you can with this product or any of our crystal greens. I'm not going to say this is as good as what crystal green is. That's kind of top tier. But its salt index is advertised at 17, but I would argue it acts less than that. So that's kind of the end of my TAP presentation here. We do offer different ones, and if some of you are familiar with crystal green, we'll blend the same polysulfate product with either CG or Synchro to create a blend like this. AgroPlus not having blending capabilities, this pearl that we talked about today is a homogeneous pearl, and you're able to get this from these guys, deal with the people you like, and get the nutrients you want, right? So you're going to be covering off 5 of the 6 macros, and you just need to add your nitrogen, right? That's the whole idea. So I'm very excited for our little venture here together, and I think we have some real potential. And yeah, Mitch is on the thing here. Salt index page is on page 7. That's correct. Mitch is right. Morning, Mitch. So next, that's kind of the end of my slideshow here. We're going to have Mike go up next and talk about some fertility products still here, but more with a focus on the foliar aspect. I will end my slideshow here. Where do I?
Just before I get going,
I was under this a bit of an assumption here. We were going to shut it down about 10. It's already 10:15.
Yeah, we're a little
So
overtime.
yeah, what I would suggest, I don't know how often you do this, but I think maybe given the time, I wouldn't go through much of what I have, but I don't know if you do this regularly, Lyle.
Pretty much every Friday from now up till seeding, but I think we're pretty well already booked for most of the next month anyways, but there's no reason why we can't schedule another one for a different day.
You know, because after what I just saw here, um, and I haven't been down in south, where are you located roughly or approximately?
Lethbridge area.
Just in Lethbridge. I mean, I put on a few down there, but not a lot, but there's I think I can contribute a lot to sort of understanding how this is. So I would suggest we do another one, but for today, I'm going to just take 5 minutes and talk to people on this about how I can change your thinking about how you look at growing a crop that might make your life really easy in just a couple of slides, okay? And then
Okay.
we'll pack her in there. Now, do I have I got to share my screen now, right?
Yeah, I made you a co-host, so you should be able to share your screen.
Share my screen. Okay, now I'll put my screen up here and I'll go to my show. And I've cut out a lot here while you guys were talking. So for a couple of reasons. Okay, so can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, okay. We'll just go through this here. I whacked out some. Now I'm gonna just sit back and think about this. We're gonna talk about these four things: photosynthesis, energy, stress, and cell development. And that's all you got to worry about as a farmer besides your management. Now, at this point,
We
I
we
use
can't
this
see
all
your
the time.
presentation, or at least I'm not.
Pardon? You're not seeing it?
Yeah, I'm not seeing it.
Okay, let me end show. Let me get this down.
You might be sharing the
And
wrong screen.
well, let's see. Oh, I got to put this in here. Entire screen. If I just pull up my screen here, I thought it would just show it.
Hmm.
No.
Mike, if you go back to in the webinar here and you press the green share screen button, then you can go to it from there.
Green share screen. Okay, here. That's what I did, and it's showing up in there. Oh, I see. Maybe share.
There we go.
Okay, you can see it.
Yep.
There it is. Okay, you can see this, and now I'll put it on presentation. See that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Looks good now.
Okay, you're seeing a canola field, right?
Yep.
Okay, here's the key principle. When we look across this field, we know that up here at the top of the hill, the conditions are different than down in the lower slope or right by these guys. All the plants have the same genetics, yet all the plants are on different kinds of environments in their root and their above ground part of the plant. So what happens is each plant is up and down regulating its genes to deal with its environment. And I got to show you the cell here. I'm going to make this short, really short, so I'm going to miss a lot of things. We'll do it in the next one. There's two important parts to this plant. There's the nucleus. I know, can you see my cursor or not?
Yep.
Okay, you can see the nucleus here, but the key things here are the chloroplast here, where photosynthesis takes place, and the mitochondria here, where energy is produced. So if we look at it simplistically, plant inputs are CO2, water, oxygen, sunlight, and nutrients. Most of you can't control much of this. You can't control your CO2. You can do a little bit of water, like you say, with stubble. Can't do much about oxygen, and you can't do much about sunlight. So you got to be really good at your nutrients. So focus on your nutrients, your management, where you're putting your seed, how much seed, the quality of the seed, and so on. For simplicity, if you look at how a plant functions, first thing it does, it takes in the CO2 in photosynthesis, and the output of photosynthesis is only one thing. It makes some ATP, but it can't use it in the rest of it. It makes sugar. The sugar then goes to the mitochondria, which then makes ATP, energy that drives the plant. Those two processes are the only two you have to worry about, because if the plant has the photosynthesis and it's got the energy, it biosynthesizes everything, all the amino acids from the nitrogen, all the carbohydrates in the plant, and all the fats in the plant. So how do you support that? Well, you support it differently as the plant grows. You put a seed dressing on for nutrients. As the plant is expanding, you put something like Build on to support it. As it's approaching reproduction, you put on different products to support both the photosynthesis and the generation of energy. That's the secret to growing a crop as far as I'm concerned. And then what you put on here to support reproduction also carries on to grain filling. So let's take a look at the nutrients we're talking about. We're talking about fertility. We're not talking about a fertilizer. So we got to understand what these nutrients do. Nitrogen and sulfur build the plant. Phosphorus drives the plant and builds the DNA. Group 3, these are the cations that basically provide the osmoregulation enzymes and so on. And then these things called the transition metals do all the work in terms of the energy and the photosynthesis. So you need to handle the big fish first. N and S, phosphorus, calcium, magnesium, all the things that were talked about. But those without the transitional metals aren't going to work, because it's the metals that do all the work in photosynthesis and energy after the plant builds the cell. So here's the way it simply goes. The photosynthesis produces the sugar goes to the mitochondria, produces ATP, and gives off CO2 and water. And folks, the same thing happens in humans, exactly the same, except we don't have chloroplasts. We make sugar from everything we eat, which comes from plants or animals that eat plants. So the first thing that happens in photosynthesis, water molecules broken. This thing called an electron transport chain is made up of all those micronutrients, iron and ferridox and copper, and it produces a little ATP. Here are the molecules that are involved in that. So you can see copper here, you can see copper here, you can see calcium in here, manganese in here, iron in here. Those are the key things we want to have. I put that in there, we won't look at that, we won't look at that. For you guys down there in potassium country, where you got lots of potassium, and Lyle, can you tell me, are you doing much tissue testing?
I don't do a whole lot. Tissue testing is a little bit of a funny subject once in a while. If you're not doing it regularly and in the right conditions and the right time of day, you can get drastically different results in the same field.
For sure, and there's good reason for that. I'll cover it in my next one. I would suggest you do that, because those high levels of potassium don't necessarily mean the plants are adequate in potassium. I see lots of that, especially when it's dry, and it's almost always dry in the south. You might be being tricked there in terms of how much potassium you're actually getting.
Yeah,
Okay?
we usually have thousands of pounds in the soil, but there's only a tiny proportion of it is actually available.
Exactly. So we're just going to jump right here to the primary product, and Clayton sort of asked me to talk about pulses a bit. So if we're going to support that plant through those various stages, slow growth, rapid growth, and then filling, take a look at what we're going to put down here. We're going to put down things, NPK. We always put down some N, because plants make proteins out of N. And everything that runs in a plant is based on proteins. We put boron. Now, because pulses use rhizobium to fix nitrogen, they need special compounds in them. They need cobalt, they need molybdenum to do that. They need these iron, manganese, and zinc to run both photosynthesis and ATP production. VPR, NPK, those are just to help the plant get out of stressful conditions that occur if you're getting flash. Remember that a plant, even though it's registered for use on that plant, it can't keep it out. So when you're spraying your weeds out or you're spraying a fungicide, it goes into the plant anyway, and the plant has to metabolize it. So you want to kick start it and get it going again. So you put on a little phosphorus to drive ATP production, and you put on the rest of it to support photosynthesis. Pod fill, the same kind of thing. We put on NPK going into bloom because that's really stressful for a plant. Build, which I think is the best product, just my personal opinion, the best product we make. It goes in here at that rapid expansion with herbicide, boron, manganese, molybdenum, zinc, all those transitional metals that are involved in the electron transport chain to make energy and run photosynthesis. The grain fill, NPK, we put N and K on there to delay a little bit of that dry down. You guys in the south, you got to worry a little bit of if it's a late year, but by delaying the senescence of the plant a little bit, even 2-3 days makes a big difference in terms of filling. And I'll just kind of leave it there. This is nitrogen. Just quickly, I want to show you peas. And you look at peas. Now you can see here in this one that here's the actual root in the pea, and this is an opening here where moisture is taken into the pea, and if you pull it off, you can see the root. So when a pea plant germinates, you can see it's got 2 horns that come off of each part of the cotyledon, and this becomes the root. Off of that root, it produces the shoot, and up she goes. And it just keeps growing until we get to blossom time. Then we got to pollinate it, and we got to pollinate every one of these seeds. Pollination is very, very stressful on the plant. There's stress on the plant all the time. And those nutrients that I talked about are key. This is pollination in peas. Here are the anthers. Here's the stigma, which becomes the pod. You can see the pollen has to mature. That's really stressful, and we need all those carbohydrates that are coming, the sugars, to keep going. Here's a pea plant. You can see that this is inside the flower. Here's the stigma, which is the pod. This is the pollen that's developing, and you can see there's no pollen on there. There you go. This is pollinated. Now, a pollen tube has to run down to every seed. That pollen tube needs to be supported because it grows as it moves through. And if we don't get pollination, we get blanks going on there, and we get small seeds later on. And I'm going to end it right there, but I would like to suggest that we have a real time to go over this, because that was just too quick. But think about the energy and the photosynthesis. If you do that, just think of it. The plant has all these genes, and it biosynthesizes everything from what it takes in. That's life on this earth depends on plants. If you can look after those 2 things, it has the genetics to do everything it needs to deal with stress, to extract nutrients from the soil. Then all you have to worry about is, can our plant roots close to where I can get it? How is the blend? Have I got good agronomic practices to make seed, there's good soil, seed contact? You cover it up so you don't lose the water and it germinates. The plant, as I call my next presentation, which will be on the web that you can look at here by about Tuesday, is the plant knows what to do. That will make your life a whole lot easier as far as I'm concerned. Just make it available. The plants will help extract it. You got to know about distances and what moves, but we'll cover that. So I'll leave it at that, Lyle. Just get guys thinking about a different way to look at why am I putting those fertilizers there? What do they do for the plant? Don't worry about your logistics. I know logistics is important, but what's it going to do for the plant? Because that's the important thing. So I'll leave it at that. Okay.
Yep, that sounds good. Well, you guys must have been interesting because we didn't lose anybody, and we've been here for an hour and a half. So that's pretty good. Okay, so with that, I guess we are done for today. So thank you very much, Clayton and Mike. It was an excellent presentation, lots of information out there, and I hope that you guys as customers found this valuable. Maybe we'll try to reschedule part 2 in not next week because of Ag Expo, but maybe the week after. So we'll chat with Mike and see when we can get that done. So thanks for joining today, and we'll see you next time. Well, not next week because of Ag Expo, but yeah,
Right.
in 2 weeks.
Thanks, guys.